Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is 11:02 on a gray and overcast day here on October 11th. So Monday morning. So I hope everyone's doing good. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Halloween is coming up really, really close. So hope everyone out there has some good plans for Halloween. I'm hoping. I'm excited for this year's Halloween. Halloween, of course, is my favorite holiday. Last year, uh, well, in all honesty, last Halloween sucked. I had this idea of throwing a party, and it was a little bit of a disaster. Well, it was a disaster. I might have mentioned it before, for whatever it's worth. But last year, I went. I had this whole plan of. I invited, I don't know, quite a few people, and I was gonna get a bunch of food, and then the plan was to hang out. Costumes are probably going to be encouraged, and then we were going to watch Halloween and Halloween 2 back to back, the original ones. That was the plan, and I was going to get some food and some beer, and so it was going to be a good time. And so I had heard back from a handful of friends and said that they were going to come, and I was expecting it to be maybe a small group, but it was one of those things of where I told some of the friends like if they wanted to bring somebody they can and that kind of thing, and so I told about maybe 10, 15 people or so, and about five of those people I knew said they were definitely going to come and bring a couple people, so I was expecting to have like a little nice little group. And I didn't care. I was excited to see if it was going to be a little bit bigger too. So the day, and everything was planned. I was going to get some food and some beer, and then I was going to, have both movies on Blu-ray. And so and it was an interesting day because on Halloween day itself, in the morning I had a bunch of errands to run. Plus, my goal was to get food and get my house all cleaned, and so I spent that week cleaning the shit out of my house extra. And then that day, ironically, in the morning, the last Quantum album that we did, which was two parts, in Dreams I Saw Chapter One, and then in Dreams I Saw Chapter Two, two separate albums. On that day, on Halloween, the album was actually done. So what I was going to do was go. The plan was on Halloween was to go down to Thomaston to Mike Whitehead's house, who plays in the band and does all the recording for our music. My great friend, and so we I was going to go down and pick up the masters, basically, and then and get we had CDs made. The artwork was all done, so I was going to be picking up the actual final products. I was really excited. So what I did was drove down to Thomaston in the morning, and then after I did that, I went to Hannaford, the store, the local supermarket here in Maine, and got a bunch of snacks and food and all this crap. And then the day later that night, and I got beer and some soda, and then came back to the house. And the plan was there's a pizza place really close to my house that's makes pretty decent pizza. And I told people to come over at 7 o'clock, 6:37, and I think it was Halloween was on I don't know, a Tuesday night or something like that. So my plan was I had to work that day. So after I came home, and I was busy doing all that for a while, for a few hours, came back, had some time, and then my plan was around, I don't know, 4:30, 5:30, I was going to put in an order for the pizzas and then go down there and pick it up. So I ended up going to work and then stuck to that plan. and ordered the pizzas. Got out of work a few minutes early, went down there, and I was back here by about, I don't know, 5:36. So I had everything here. I got two giant pizzas and had chips and all that stuff and beer and then I had a bunch of Halloween candy. I got popcorn. So I was excited. And then so about 6 o'clock or so, and then one after another, I had one person, one friend, and then 20 minutes later another friend, and then 20 minutes later after that another friend, saying that they couldn't come, and I was like, oh man. And then one friend who said he was going to come just never showed up, and literally that night nobody showed up to the party, and I was like, what is going on? This is so pathetic. So I literally sat home, ate some candy, had a slice of pizza, and I watched Halloween by myself. It was pretty funny. But this year on Halloween, I actually have a gig on Halloween, which is cool, and it's going to be a costume party. And I haven't really had a gig on actual Halloween. Halloween this year is on a Friday, so I can't remember the last time it was that I had a gig on Halloween, which is cool. Usually, like, gig wise or whatever, I've had gigs a lot in the past where it's like the weekend before or Halloween weekend, but not actually on Halloween. So it'll be interesting. So I'm excited, and it's going to be with Space Junk, formerly the former members Ronnie and Halsey from Bone Broth, and we'll have some other people who are going to be getting together and playing with us. And we have a rehearsal tomorrow, so I'm really excited about that. So anyway, but I hope otherwise people have some great and awesome plans for Halloween, because it's the best holiday there is. So anyway, so today I've been reviewing. This is the second movie I'm reviewing, but I've been going to. I went to Opera House Video on Saturday and got three new releases, and so this is the second review for the second movie. I recorded it when did I do it? Sunday. Yesterday was Sunday. I recorded it in the morning, and I just uploaded it, and that is from for the movie Megan that came out in, I think, 2023, a Blumhouse sci-fi-ish horror film. It's a doll horror movie essentially, I guess. So pretty mixed. I thought it was pretty good until I kind of checked out of it. But overall, I don't know if I would recommend that movie. And so I got three movies on Saturday. It was Megan, I got Presence, and then also Nobody 2. So today's show is going to be on Presence, which is a newer Steven Soderbergh film that came out. I was looking it up, and it actually came out in 2024, so it's actually a little bit older than I thought. So Steven Soderbergh is a pretty interesting director. I mean, he's got a shit ton of movies to his credit. I mean, he's been around for quite a few years. He's done, he's definitely bounced around and done, all kinds of films, action movies, dramas, even, science fiction. And Presence, which is more or less his latest movie, is, well, I guess you could call it a horror movie. I mean, it is a little bit, I think that's a safe way to label it, but it's a Steven Soderbergh horror film, so it's definitely not your typical horror film. But Steven Soderbergh has made some incredible movies. Probably the best movie he's ever directed, I think, is Traffic with Michael Douglas and Benicio del Toro, which came out quite a few years ago. He's made some really great movies, I mean, without a doubt. He did another movie he directed that I actually really like a lot is Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which with James Spader. That movie's amazing. I'd love to see that movie again. That's old school. I mean, he's been around for a long time. And then other films like Contagion, Matt Damon is actually really good. Another movie of his that I think is super overrated, or I'm sorry, super underrated, is Out of Sight with Jennifer Lopez and George Clooney. Awesome movie. Really, really good. Kind of crime thriller film. Really great and super underrated. And that's a pretty old film at this point. He also made Erin Brockovich with oh shit, what's her name? Can't believe I can't remember her name. which was one of his most Julia Roberts, probably commercially probably his biggest film, one of his biggest films. He got a bunch of acclaim for that. Uh, I believe it won a bunch of awards, Academy Awards. Also, he did Ocean's 11, which I actually really think is an awesome movie. Super entertaining, really stylized, great music. Um, and he's worked for a long time with this composer that I actually really love a lot. Um, David Holmes, who is actually a really great electronic artist. He scored a lot of the films, a lot of Steven Soderbergh's films. And he's actually a really great electronic artist. I have a couple of his studio albums, really cool stuff. And he's worked with him for many, many years, for years and years. Um, so I mean, he's made some incredible films. There's been this giant gap of where he didn't do any movies for a really long time, and all of a sudden he's kind of back. He made a film, which is actually which actually came out in 2025, Black Bag, and it was kind of his return, I guess you could say, to making films, which is like a thriller, a spy thriller. It's okay. It's not very good though. I was pretty let down with that film. I think sometimes later, like early Steven Soderbergh is really good, and I think late early Soderbergh is definitely, again, there's so many great movies he's made, but it's pretty mixed. I think his career, and then more recently, I think he's made films that kind of suffer from that thing of where it's like, I don't know, more style over substance. And I think Black Bag is one of those films. Not very good. It looks great. It's a pretty sexy thriller. It's cool music. Um, Cinematography's fantastic, but it's boring as all hell. And so this new movie that he just did, or actually I should say it's 2024, is Presence, and it's essentially a ghost movie, more or less, and it's kind of told from the ghost's perspective, which is pretty unique. And I would say, it's a take or a version of, kind of your classic ghost story, if you will, haunted house story, but done in a very different way. And it's more or less kind of told from, well, at least visually, from kind of the ghost's perspective. And it's kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting movie, and you don't really have this. There's an interesting kind of plot reveal towards the end that was definitely surprising. And there's a lot of really cool camera angles because, again, it's about this family that's suffering this tragedy, and they, are trying to move on with their lives. They're moving into this new house, and they're trying to rebuild their lives. But there is this presence or entity, presence, like title, a ghost that is kind of overseeing their lives and is trying to kind of interact with them in subtle ways, but then it gets more intense as you go. And then the ghosts kind of acts as a, kind of this premonition that is trying to undo, some horrible things that have happened, and essentially is trying to save someone's life. So it's pretty interesting, and there is this plot reveal with this kid who is who ends up being, you end up finding out, is responsible for these murders that have been happening. So, and again, it's very it's pretty interesting. The cast is pretty good. Lucy Liu is in this film, which I have not seen. I had not seen her in a really long time. The rest of the cast are all people I had never seen before, but all pretty good. And it's mostly centered on this whole family, and it takes place all within this really large house. I mean, it doesn't have. I mean, again, it's a ghost story essentially, but it's done from a different kind of perspective, and it does not have your typical tropes that you would see or things that you would kind of come to expect from a movie that is about a haunting or some kind of entity. And I guess I don't know, it kind of works for this film because, I mean, again, Steven Soderbergh is, he's a very stylized director. He has a very kind of, kind of heightened reality to a lot of the look or looks of his film and his aesthetics. And he always does, you know, something a little bit unusual with his films. He always has, like, if it's a thriller film, if it's a movie about, if it's a thriller or if it's a science fiction kind of a based film, he'll always do something a little bit unique with it where he doesn't really. One of the things I do like about his films is that he doesn't really stick to, kind of tried tropes that you see in a film. He'll do something a little bit unorthodox, but he definitely has a very visual flair to it. Not all the time. I don't. A lot of times I don't think it's successful because sometimes I think as a director he gets so preoccupied with making it, creating this kind of heightened reality with his characters that the story itself isn't really, doesn't really have enough meat to it. But it's just my opinion. So with Presence, again, it does not fit in. There aren't any tropes that you expect from that you have seen in a ghost story film or a horror film. There isn't this, there isn't any real atmosphere. There isn't. It's a pretty slow film. It's more or less all dialogue driven, but there isn't any atmosphere. There is barely any music in this film. It's very minimalist, and it does feel like I guess kind of it has this art house quality to it, which is kind of interesting. It's very dry though. It's a very dry film, and the template or the colors and the way it's shot. The use of the camera is really interesting, but like the location, it's kind of plain. It's not very exciting. Like I thought the camera angles that he used and the cinematography was really interesting because again, it's kind of told from this spirits or entities perspective, like from that visual lens, but it doesn't really have. I don't know. It's kind of like aesthetically and yeah, when it comes to the world building of this set or there aren't any big giant set pieces. It's very minimalist. It's very kind of ordinary. Um, I don't know. Maybe I can almost say it's almost kind of mundane and a little bit stagnant or kind of boring. It doesn't have any quote unquote creepy atmosphere or anything taken from say like classic ghost story films at all. Like it doesn't have that at all. It's very dry. It's very direct. It's very dialogue driven. The second and third act, though, I will say that it does move into territory of where it does take on some more, well, to a degree, traditional horror tropes that you see or ghost story tropes, which I thought were kind of cool, kind of interesting. I think the cast is pretty solid in this film. I was engaged enough with the characters and the story. I felt like the other thing too is it does feel like I don't think it was the case, but it does feel like the screenplay or the dialogue in this film was kind of improvised. It's very loose, and it's very kind of everyday, and you don't, there's situations of where there's conversations. The way the film is shot, from I guess a narrative perspective, there's like situations in this house of where there are conversations going on in one room and maybe a conversation going on in another, and there's times of where you're not really sure what someone's talking about or what's actually going on, but you just kind of hear this, and so it is very grounded, and it is kind of very realistic that way, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I did like again, I did think the ending and kind of the plot reveal were kind of interesting. It's kind of centered around the again a series of these mysterious kind of murders that happen, and then the reveal of who this killer is, and it's more or less brought to the light through this entity. So, and then also there is this kind of warning that is being sent or being pushed onto the family from this entity of like future things that could happen or that do happen, future tragedies. And again, I thought that was interesting. I thought the ending, that last kind of little twist for like say the third act, was like kind of, I guess, wasn't really predictable, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I thought I thought there, like I guess you could say I didn't really see it coming, and I thought that was kind of interesting and kind of cool. But ultimately, I thought this movie was just kind of nah. I thought it was just kind of it was okay. I and again I know it's Steven Soderbergh for film, and he's definitely when he's on. But I kind of felt like this movie was a little bit too dry. I wanted it to have some more atmosphere to it. I don't know. It's like sometimes when you're trying to tackle somewhat a film or a style that's like a genre specific kind of thing, and you try to make it something that it's not, or like I think there's a balance. You can have both. You can do something really creative and different, and yet still have that kind of satisfying element to it. And I felt like this film wasn't very satisfying that way. It was very dry. I thought the writing was kind of interesting. I liked some of the characters, but the film itself was just kind of, it was kind of, it was okay. Maybe this might have been the best film to a degree out of the three that I've gotten that I just watched as far as newer films. But it's ultimately kind of a dry film, and I don't know if I would recommend it. And it's a little bit unsatisfying, and it's okay. It's a little it's I feel like it's a little bit too bland for me. A little bit too dry. I wish it was a little bit more exciting or had a little bit more. Um, well, I kind of wish it had some tropes that were taken that are taken from classic ghost stories to make it feel a little bit more authentic, but yet he could still do something new. And I felt the lack of all of those things, like where there wasn't any of that, it was it's like it's a ghost movie, but where it wants to be a ghost story film and a horror film, but it's really not. Um, but I think the movie itself is not bad, I guess. But that happens sometimes with other films, other directors that do take ambitious leaps or big ambitious swings where they try to take on a genre and then they try to do something really, really different, and it ultimately isn't really that at all, if that makes sense. Like I think two examples that I can think of are not Benicio del Toro's, um, Guillermo del Toro, excuse me, the director who has a new film coming out, Frankenstein. He did that with the vampire franchise. Well, I think he did it twice, really, but he did that with the vampire franchise with the film that he did early on in his career called Kronos, which is an interesting movie. It's definitely an art house film, has some good moments, but it's a vampire movie, but it's really kind of not a vampire movie. and it really leaves a lot to be desired. I think that movie, and I think that's an example of kind of the same thing with what Soderbergh has done with this, taking on a horror ghost story film essentially. Um, Trying too preoccupied with making it too different to where it's not even really that at all, that kind of thing. Um, I think Guillermo del Toro did the same exact thing with Kronos because it's a vampire movie, but then it's not really. I don't know. Um, and then the movie that I was the most disappointed with, which is an absolute terrible. Kronos is actually a pretty good movie, but it's not really satisfying in the way that you feel like it should be. And I feel like Presence is kind of the same thing. It's not a bad movie. There are some really cool qualities to it, but ultimately it's just kind of unsatisfying. Um, and then another example of it was is it came out earlier this year. Lee Whannell's Wolfman, which that movie is just unwatchable. That movie is just kind of god awful. That was They tried so hard to make it into a werewolf movie, but it's actually not a werewolf film, and that movie was such a disaster. There's not really any redeeming qualities about that movie. So there's times when that happens, and I think Guillermo del Toro did the same thing with Blade 2, which I think that movie, coming off the heels of Blade, is so disappointing. And so this is kind of an example of that happening with directors trying to tackle more or less something, that is kind of genre specific. So anyway, I don't know if I recommend this movie. There's far better movies out there to check out if you're into wanting to watch something that has a ghost, that is a ghost horror film, or a ghost, like a classic ghost story, by far. So anyway, thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.